Welcome to What's in the Box, episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna,
And I'm Eric.
and we're once again doing another Texas AuthorCon author interview, and we have Jay Bauer with us. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We didn't get a chance to talk a lot at AuthorCon, but we did meet there briefly.
Yep.
Because you were down in the room with RJ Benetti and some other folks.
Yeah, we were hidden way in the back corner. We had John Lynch was our bouncer just
John
outside the
Lynch.
door
Yep.
for us. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was right outside the door.
Yep.
So we're just doing these interviews so people can get a chance to know about the authors that'll be at Texas AuthorCon next month. Hopefully, when it comes out, people will be interested enough to, if they can come to the event, stop by your table. And we'll just start off with our icebreaker questions. So Jason, Freddie, or Michael?
Ooh, so this has changed over the years. It is absolutely Michael right now. It used to be Freddie, and I was all about Freddie and Jason early on, but as the years have gone on, it's absolutely Michael, hands down.
Yeah. I'm Team Jason, and we get a lot of Freddie,
Yep,
and we
I'm
don't get a
Team
ton
Freddie.
of Michael, which is cool because I think if I've been thinking I need to sit down and rewatch all the Halloween movies and really do a deep dive now because I know I've seen them all, but I don't know if I've given them the proper amount of time like I do because I still watch all the Friday 13th continuously. So
Yeah, early on, like I didn't watch the Halloween movies very often or at all, really. And I watched a lot of Friday the 13th and of course Nightmare on Elm Street. That first one was so good and it
Mhm.
still is. And it's got just a little bit of a cheesiness, which is absolutely my vibe. The horror and the cheesiness, that 80s stuff, that's what I grew up on. That was me. So I really connected with it. But looking back at all of them now, like Halloween for me still holds up. Like Michael Myers still scares the crap out of me and still has this aura about him. And that movie itself just, I don't know, it still has more of a fright factor for me than the other two do,
Mhm.
even after all this time. So.
Yeah, and I think I gravitate towards Jason just because that was the one I watched the most as a kid, probably.
Yeah.
I love that franchise. And I think beginning to end, you can pick any of the movies and I'll be entertained by them. Problem with
Yeah.
Halloween is I've seen all of them in the theater, but my favorite one is probably right now, I would say 3, which has
Mhm.
nothing to do with Michael at all. So that makes
Right.
me go, well, maybe I don't, so but I did enjoy when they did the new ones.
Mhm.
When they did that first one, and I thought, well, this is cool. I really loved the first one. I hated the second one and I refused to watch the third one. But that first one, it made me think I need to go back and start watching all of them again.
Right.
So now I did rewatch 1 and 2. I thought 2 was better than 1, actually, when I rewatched them. I really did enjoy 2.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So but I think it's maybe because a lot of the things that make the first one scary and
Mhm.
really grab people's attention in the beginning, we've seen a million times because, of course, everybody's copying these movies
Right.
over and over
Right.
again.
Yeah.
So, and I
Yeah.
think that'd probably be the problem. But yeah, I agree with you. Nightmare 1 and 3, I think, are the best,
Mhm.
and you can kind of shoot the rest of them out in the sun and doesn't matter. So,
Yeah.
but the 1 and 3 are just close to perfect in my mind for a horror movie, just the right amount of everything. So,
Yeah.
And now, werewolves or vampires?
Um, well, I'm gonna go vampires on this. Just I got nothing against werewolves, but um, I'll lean a little bit more towards vampires. I mean, I did do a series that had a vampire in it, so I guess that probably should be the way I go with it. But
Yeah.
we'll go vampires. Yeah.
and what's funny is when we started this, everybody is werewolf, 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 and I thought it was going to be werewolf landslide. We weren't going to get, but the last couple weeks, as we've gotten near halfway point or so, it's swung to vampires a
Oh, there's
lot.
Albie.
Oh, we got a
Yep.
visitor.
Bye,
So,
Albie.
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's become more heavily vampire. So let's say, what kind of vampire are you big into? I mean, is there a specific kind, or you just blanket
Um,
vampire here.
Yeah, so and it's funny because I've read Stoker's Dracula,
Hmm.
and I did not like it at all, at all. You give me that or Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm with Frankenstein all day long. Absolutely love that book. Um, but I like the vampires. I kind of like are more of the kind of a little more biological in a way. Have you seen The Strain?
Hmm.
Mhm.
You know, and it was kind of more
Yeah,
just a little different, you know. That
kind of like the Blade 2
yeah,
vampires.
yeah. So that's kind of where I gravitate toward, um, in the direction I go with some of my vampires. But
I would say 90% of the people we've talked to, that's the vampire. When they pick a vampire, it's always a more, dirty,
yeah,
um,
Feral.
almost, yeah,
yeah,
almost
Yep.
werewolf like. They gravitate towards the ones that are not, pretty and
mhm.
glittery or whatever and all that
Not
stuff.
Lestat.
Yeah, well, I mean those are your choices really, because
Yeah.
although was it Ruth Ann that brought up Let the Right One In or Let Me In or whatever it
Yep.
was? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good vampire too. And she's a little, I mean, she's creepy because she's a kid. And then you're like, okay. And then we see this, however old she's supposed to be, but trapped in a 12-year-old body. That right there is pretty creepy because
Right.
she
And
was
then
pretty brutal.
and there was it 30 Days of the Night? Was that the movie
Yeah.
where
Yep.
up in Alaska?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that one I like that one a bit, but
I liked it, but I was really, when it got done, because I didn't see it when it came out immediately. I think I waited probably 10 years before I even found it and sat down and watched it because I'm not a big vampire guy. I won't
right.
go, I'll go out of my way to watch a werewolf movie, but I don't, I can do either way with the vampires. But I finally sat down because everybody was talking about how much they liked it. And I did. I thought it was fun, but boy, I wanted to know more about those vampires. I'd love a good backstory of why they were that way,
Right.
you know?
Right.
It was
Yeah.
like almost like a plague, the way that they swept in just wipes everything out. But there was something to it, and
Hmm.
just how just intense, and they had that great vibe. They're speaking. Well, I guess they were speaking Russian or whatever it was, some foreign language, and it
Right.
had so much potential to be even more than just vampires killing this town. If we had a little bit more to go with those creatures, I thought that would have been fun. And I've heard that the sequel does a little bit of that, but I've also heard the sequel's terrible. So
No, I didn't even know there was a sequel.
yeah, I think it was a direct to video,
Yeah.
like video or something. I mean, like it was like even worse. Like it's direct to video, but you can only get it from Bob over at the Quickie Mart, and that's it. It was one of those kind of things. So
Nice.
very low budget,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Nice. So, as a kid, what was your favorite scary movie?
Um, the original Hills Have Eyes
Oh,
That's a
scared
great.
the
yeah.
hell out of me. I watched a lot of those horror movies when I was way too young. But
Mhm.
I loved them. That just was what I was gravitated toward. And I'd always make my brother, to have a younger brother, and we would we would watch. He didn't really like them, and so I would of course turn off all the lights while we're watching the horror
Of
movies.
course.
That's what you do. Um, but yeah, that movie that just freaked me out. Um, I haven't seen it in a while, um, but growing up, that one really got to me.
Did you ever watch the remake?
I watched a little bit of it, but I didn't watch the whole thing. Yeah.
It's one of the few remakes that I like. That I feel like at least it does a good job of holding the vibe.
Mhm.
I'm not a big remake fan.
Yeah.
I don't mind a few. Yeah, I don't mind it, but there's a lot of times there's no point.
I
Um,
agree. There's so much original stuff that they could be going with instead of rehashing everything. But
yeah,
Yeah.
I like it when they revisit. Like I like the reimagining, like they did
mhm,
with Evil Dead, where
mhm,
it was heavily influenced, but it wasn't exactly a frame by frame remake or anything.
right.
I kind of like it when they do that. We can get some fresh blood in there. That's fine. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of like I've never seen the Nightmare on Elm Street remake because
Mhm,
I just have no desire to see anybody else play Freddy Krueger. Um, I didn't see. I think I saw one of the Michael Myers remakes.
right.
Um, but anyways, that one holds up because the director is the guy that directed High Tension, and I think the shark movie that came out recently. Was it
Meg?
now blank.
No.
No, it's not cheesy. The one that has it's in Florida and maybe it's alligators. Yeah, it was alligators. It's in
Oh,
there's
Crawl?
Crawl. Yeah, Crawl.
That was
That
a great movie.
and so it's the same director. So the guy knows what he's doing when he does a horror picture, and he pays homage to the original. It was a really good. I think it's a fun remake or whatever. But the original is terrifying because Wes
Mhm.
Craven knew how to take something that's dirty and gross and put it on film and make you feel dirty and gross the whole time you're watching it.
Yep.
So yeah, and that's a great. I mean, we haven't had anything like that come up. I don't think. That's cool.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah,
times it's we start with 3 classics, and then when we ask what was your favorite movie, it's in the same vein.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a fun thing to hear you say that you like that one growing up.
Yeah. I always thought of The Hills Have Eyes when I would watch that episode of the X-Files Home.
Mhm.
Like I think that was like their most like controversial episode or something. It always reminded me of The Hills Have Eyes, and I always had a hard time watching that episode, but I always watched that episode
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I loved it so much, you know? Yeah. Now, would you say your favorite movie has changed since now that you're an adult?
Yes, it has. So, my favorite horror movie, I think, would probably be the original Saw movie. Because it had a lot more tension and a lot more, it wasn't just all the blood and gore, which is perfectly fine. But I felt the first one, was done really, really well, and it just kind of really built up to this horrible decision, and I just had so much to it. So that I think the original Saw is probably my favorite horror movie now.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job because you really can feel yourself in that situation when you're watching
Yeah.
it. I remember watching it for the first time. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it probably a year after it came out. It was the height of my kid being too young for me to go do anything. So
Right.
I remember sitting there watching it thinking, man, this is amazing, Now, after that, I think it's all downhill. So, because then it's just over the top. Them just trying to gross everything out. It becomes more hostile-like. And so, but yeah, that first Saw is amazing.
So, Hostel, so a funny story about that. I saw the previews for it and everything and all that. And my wife and I both like the original Saw. She's not big on horror. But she liked that movie, and I was like, oh, I think it's got some Saw vibes to it, right? I was like, I think it's gonna be like that. So we get in and watch the movie, and like the first 20 minutes of the movie, it's like kind of softcore porn of Hostel, and I'm like, oh crap, she's not gonna like this at all. And I look over at her, and she's got this look on her face. I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't going well.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah, and then it gets to all the torture and everything that's going on, and I was like, oh yeah, she's hating this for sure, So we got done with the movie, and she was like really quiet for a while, and I was like, I'm sorry, I thought it'd be more like Saw. That's kind of what I felt with it. And it disturbed that movie. It disturbed me in a lot of ways because it felt like it really could be happening. Those places in the world, kind of lawless. Very a lot of corruption. I could absolutely see money making that happen. And so that kind of really hit me. Like it felt like it could really be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's easier prey than someone in a different country than where they live, where if you remove a piece of paper from their possession, they're kind of stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Your passport, if you lose that, that's one of the things I have an issue with going abroad. But you're right, Jay. I mean, people in another country, especially, not in more, I don't want to say less developed places, but like, smaller countries with less technology and access
Oh, I would
to
say it's happening here, so I wouldn't worry about
yeah,
where
that's
you're
true
at.
too.
I mean,
True.
There's enough people
True.
with money here doing that.
Yeah.
So
and
I
this
wouldn't
whole
be shocked.
Yeah, that whole secret like hunting society kind of thing,
Mhm.
and it's like you put up enough money, like, oh, you paid all this much, you can get an American, it's like
Yeah.
I absolutely felt like that could happen, and it probably is
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah,
I
it's
would not
more
be surprised.
believable than a Saw type
Yep,
situation.
yep, I agree.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Um, so if you were to be approached and say, "Hey," and someone says, "I'm new to, horror," what book would you recommend that they start reading?
Oh, wow. A new person to horror, huh? I would probably say kind of like all the rest of us, probably something from King I mean, like, I guarantee all three of us, if we said, what was some of the first horror books that you read, we were all going to say King, right? Like he's
Hmm.
kind of like the gateway drug for,
Yeah.
for most, and, um, you know, and it's the most accessible, I think, for a lot of people. They've probably heard the name before, you
Yeah.
know, um, just to kind of break them into it. I think I would probably say something like that. I do think indies have, oh my gosh, they've exploded so much over the past few years and have created so many cool stories and so many different subgenres, that people are just crushing it with. But someone new to it, I think, a lot of that might be a little overwhelming because there's just so much, so many really different things. But somebody like King is a known commodity to everybody. I think I probably would go that route.
Well, which one would you pick?
I'd go to one of his older ones, maybe like
Yeah.
The Shining. It's my favorite of his, so that's probably the one I would choose.
Yeah, it's my favorite too.
Yeah.
I still have to read that. I've read Doctor Sleep, but I haven't read The Shining yet.
Yeah, I loved it. I like the movie. I know they're very different, but I like
I
both of them
love
for
the
different
movie.
reasons.
Yeah, I love the
Um,
movie.
but yeah,
Mm,
I know
And
he
it,
hates it, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
love it. So, um,
it's done him well.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
can't hate it too much.
yeah.
you
And
know,
yeah, I haven't read anything after Needful Things, I don't think.
Okay.
That was the last one. I gave up on Needful Things, and then I just have never gone back. But I do like his early stuff. I've read a lot of that. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, The Shining, man, that's a good book. I love
Yeah.
that's that and Pet Cemetery. Misery is really good.
Pet
Um,
Cemetery. So the very first novel I ever read on my own, not for school or anything like, but just on my own, was Pet Cemetery. Um,
oh,
Good start.
yeah, my mom was and still is a huge Stephen King fan, and books are always around the house. And I remember seeing that on the coffee table. And I was like, that looks kind of cool. And I started reading it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, yes, this is it. I love it. Um, that was kind of my intro to him, and really my intro to horror fiction. I'd seen
Yeah.
horror movies and things, but reading it, I didn't really read a bunch until then. And that, I was early, maybe preteen, early teen, something like that, when I
Mhm.
picked it up for the first time. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my parents made the mistake of telling the librarian that I could check out anything, that there was no restrictions. So my first one was Cujo.
There you go.
I thought, oh, big dog, this looks cool. So
Yeah.
yeah. Now, do you
Yeah.
have a favorite horror novel?
Of all time, uh, I don't. Wow. Probably The Shining still. I mean, there's a lot of great books that I've been reading over the years, but um, that one just kind of sticks with me. It may not be the best horror novel out there, but that's one that does stick with me. I think. I'll probably have to go with The Shining. That's a good question.
yeah, it's really
Nice.
hard to pin one down, especially if you revisit some of these when you're older, different age, all that
Yep.
plays into it when you're reading these stories.
Right.
Because when you read it initially, you're much younger usually, and so you probably lean more towards Danny. But I can easily read The Shining today and completely understand what's going on with Jack and
Hmm.
Yeah.
go through that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I mean, you can see, all of that, and you can kind of understand when you didn't when you were younger because you just don't understand
Right.
um,
And a lot
adult
more things
issues.
stick out to you. Like you may read
Hmm.
something and it means something totally different now than it did when you were younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I discovered indie horror, um, two books I read early on kind of set the tone for things. And one of them, the very first indie published book I ever read, was called The Stone Man by Luke Smitherd.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know who he is.
No
He
idea.
actually used to have a podcast with Matt Shaw. It was called Smithered and
Oh,
Shaw.
that's cool.
And that was my first introduction to Matt Shaw, was listening to him on a podcast.
Mhm.
But The Stone Man was really cool. It was very different. It had a little bit more of a sci-fi feel to it. But that one and Womb by Duncan Halston, my two intros to indie horror. I was like, all
Wow.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no clue. I don't even know what I thought was going to happen when I wrote my first one, because I had no idea. I didn't know about the groups. I didn't know people got together and talked about this stuff. I didn't know about I understood conventions because I did comic stuff my entire life, but I didn't
Right.
know about book stuff, and I don't know what I was thinking. But I wrote that first one and then figured out you could self-publish it. And I just was like, oh, and then I discovered everybody. I thought, oh man, look at all this stuff I've been missing out on for years. There's all this great stuff and people, and I was like, man, and so yeah, like you say, you just kind of get dumped into it, and you find all these amazing, cool people and
Yep.
books, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a fun ride just doing that. I mean, I think that's been kind of. I'm not very outgoing and running out to meet people and stuff, but I did enjoy, like when we went to Scares and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm excited to see everybody come to Texas Author Con. I mean, it's going to be a big event, so I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It is going to be really cool. There's going to be several folks that we all met in Williamsburg, but then a lot of other people that I haven't met yet. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and the
really.
floor layout's going to be fun too. I just think, I mean, people are going to be able to go and just see everybody and go to the panel stuff, but not really be separated,
Yeah,
So that's kind of fun too. You're going to run into people as you're doing stuff. So
exactly.
Yep. So for people who don't know about your books or haven't heard your name before, can you just tell us what genre you like to write in?
Wow. So yeah, I've really been thinking about that lately, about like, because I write horror, but I write in all kinds of different like subgenres of it. Like I do supernatural with like demonic entities, almost ghost-like entities. I've done serial killers. I've done some slashers, some bloody and gory. I've done my zombie series. So I've kind of been all over, but I think where I'm most comfortable, what I like to write the most, and I think what my readers are really enjoying the most, is more of that supernatural, demonic type of things. This year, I've released 3 books. All 3 of them were demon related. And I don't know, I feel comfortable with that, I guess. When I've done early on in my career, when I did some bloody, gory stuff, that did not go over very well with my audience at the time. My first book was not bloody and gory, and so I think that it was a big shift for them and didn't quite work. But readers now are experiencing those and going back, and they like them. But at the time, it just wasn't. I went from one that wasn't really bloody and gory to serial killer, then to super bloody and gory, and that just turned them off, I think.
And which I find really weird, because that's one of my favorite things about you as a writer, is that you don't sit in a box and do the one thing over and over again. You have got stuff going on in all the different sandboxes, and you have the same philosophy I think I have, which is everything is horror.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter what we're doing, but it's all going to have that horror feel to it, but we can do whatever we want within that realm of whatever else we're doing. So I enjoy the fact that you do all these other different things, and that there's a level to it, because sometimes you want a lot of horror, gore, and you don't really need a story. And sometimes you really want a more in-depth story. And sometimes you want like you said, the demonic stuff, because that's hard to do. People, I've read enough of that to know that that's not something that a lot of people can actually do well and keep your attention through the whole story. So the fact that you're just pumping them out like you are this year, that's commendable, I think. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, the brakes are going to come on that hitting fast now on what's coming out, because I had all these ready to go this first half of the year, but this second half, I've got a short story anthology that I was invited to. I've got that, and then my super secret project with John Durgan and John Lynch.
that sounds really cool. That sounds very cool. I don't
Yeah.
even know anything about it. I just had to, all I heard the 3 names, and then you go,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's going to be cool. I don't need to worry about the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's awesome that you guys are doing something.
Yeah, and
Jay,
that
John, and John.
yeah, well, my middle name is John, so we really could
Oh,
be like John, John, and John. But
and John Durgan is Jon, isn't he? Doesn't he?
no, no,
Oh
it's
no,
yep, yeah.
I
And
thought he.
I credit Scares for this, you know,
Mhm.
because I had talked to John Lynch a little bit before Scares, and then when we got there, you know, I wanted to go meet him as soon as I could because you know we talked a little bit, and I did, and then over the week or the weekend we talked quite a bit, you know, especially since once he got moved to right outside the door, and so he and I talked quite a bit about different things, um, and then he and I were talking afterwards about wanting to do a project together, and we wanted to get another person involved, and so we both came up with a list of authors, and John was on the top one for both of us, and so we approached him and were like, "Hey, we've got this," and he immediately was like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's do that." So
That's
Nice.
great.
so it's been really cool. We chat almost daily, you know, the 3 of us.
Mhm.
We were chatting a bunch today about it. So as it gets closer, we'll reveal some more. I will say we've hired a cover designer already, and we've booked Candice Nola for our editing on it. So
That's great.
it's going to be
Sweet.
something special, and we're excited about
Sweet. Can't go wrong with Candace.
it. Yeah, yeah. She did my Cadaverous book for me.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah.
We need a sequel. I don't know how that would work out, but
Yeah, I thought about it. I really have. Oh, there's Albie.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that happen a lot of times though when you're writing it and you're like, well, if I had to do a sequel, you know, while you're doing it, you're like, well, you can start seeing it kind of branch out sometimes. I have that
Yeah.
happen all the time when I'm writing. So like if you get that, because it's shocking how many times somebody will finish a book and tell you, hey, where's the sequel? Yeah. I just finished
that's
this one. Give me a
that's
second.
me. I'm the
Yeah.
worst for that because if I really like a book, I'll go right to the author and be like, I need a sequel.
You know
Can
what?
you
And
give me a sequel?
actually like it. I like that kind of excitement can
Mhm.
just all it does is energize a writer, usually.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah, I'm
to
like,
me, having
I
somebody say
need,
I read something and I need another one,
Yep.
that makes
yeah.
that'll put an extra zip in your step. So
Yes, it will. Yeah, it really does.
So when you're writing, Jay, do you listen to anything specific, music wise?
Sometimes I do. Most often it's dead silent, and that works better for me. But if I do listen to music, it's almost always instrumental. And I'm trying to think what I listened to some music when I was writing, like Cadaverous and Every Time I Die, and often and it's funny because you know, reading Cadaverous, you know, it's all about heavy metal, and I mentioned a ton of music and included a playlist in the back. But I didn't really listen to that while I was writing it because songs with lyrics will distract me from writing. So I do listen to like a lot of like my favorite classical composer is Tchaikovsky, and there's some playlists of like Tchaikovsky's darker songs, and so I'll listen to that because it kind of sets the mood for this darker tone, you know. So that kind of helps me to kind of get into it a little bit, or I'll just listen to some other, some kind of darker, creepier sounding music to kind of set the mood for me as I'm writing. But it's almost always has to be instrumental. I have written one book. I think it was Soul Eyes, my second book. I listened to a lot of Slayer when I was writing that one. I just really to get in that aggressive kind of mood, you know, but I usually don't listen to anything with lyrics to it.
Yeah,
I'm interested. I gotta read Soul Eyes to see if I
if you
can
get the
pick up
Slayer vibe.
the Slayer vibe, the influence from the music.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about YouTube is they have all those really interesting playlists. You can type in a couple things. I listen to a lot of stuff. It'll be like 19th century villain, and they'll be heavy with cello, and it'll be darker music and stuff. And then I love that they'll put sound effects to it. So you have the rain, or maybe you have like nature, and then you've got some dark, you know, classical music that's real heavy and stuff, and it'll help.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It pulls you into the vibe that you
Yeah.
need when you're doing this stuff.
So tell us about your newest release, or I think you went into this, but maybe tell the viewers about Cadaverous, because you had that one, and then
Every
what was
Time
the
I
one?
Die.
Every Time I Die. So tell us about that
Yeah.
one, because I know
Yeah.
about Cadaverous.
I'll talk about the two of them. Yeah. I'll talk
Yeah.
about the two of them because they were kind of written at the same time. So I actually started writing Every Time I Die first. And that one is published through D&T Publishing, through Dawn and them.
Mhm.
And when I submitted my 10,000 words last year, that's all I had for it. I didn't have anything else to it, and I was really hoping that she would like it, and she did. And so I started writing it. And that one, that's demonic. The demon in that one, it's been so long. I believe his name is Molech. And the main character, Alex, he makes a deal with his demon because he died in a car wreck, and he makes this deal with his demon. It turns out to be a really horrible demon, and he has to basically turns him into a killer to appease this demon because he wanted to be alive for his family. Everything was done for his family. So it's a pretty dark story. It's definitely got a darker vibe than Cadaverous does. It's got the grossest scene I think I've ever written, isn't it?
Okay.
And I've had John Lynch actually messaged me about it. He was like, I don't want to say what the scene was because I'd like it's a fun surprise when you get to it. But he messaged me to it. He was like, "Dude," I was like, "Yes, you're welcome."
That's funny.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and but I had a couple of people actually message me about that particular scene. So it's got the grossest scene I think I've ever written is in it, and it's definitely got a darker tone and darker vibe. Very heavy on the demonic side of it, and it's on the shorter side. It's a little over 40,000 words, so it's not a very long book. But while I was writing that and finishing it up, I'd started Cadaverous, and that too is demonic, and the demon in that one is Payman. It follows a 18-year-old boy named Gage Penrod, who wants to get back to his heavy metal band, his high school heavy metal band, and he makes a deal with his demon basically to gain his powers. The whole trope of selling your soul to the devil kind of thing is basically what he does, and it turns into a really bloody and gory and kind of a fun story. I
The
mean,
most dangerous band in the world.
yes. I mean, what book can you start with Ozzy and end with Guar, right? Like
Yeah.
it's everything in between. They definitely lean on that like late 80s, early 90s thrash metal, even though it's a band from 2017, 2018, they play that older stuff, which is all the stuff I grew up on, the stuff I loved. And that particular book, I remember telling John Durgan when we were at AuthorCon that a little bit of that vibe was kind of inspired by The Cursed Among Us. Just like the kids and having to deal with these terrible entities and all this other stuff. Like it was a little bit inspired by that. And Gage Penrod. Gage actually is named after Gage Greenwood, which I did tell him that, but I spelled it slightly different. But I borrowed his first name for my character.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool. All right. So other than Texas AuthorCon, where can people connect with you, buy your books?
Yeah. So the easiest place is just to go to jbauerauthor.com. I sell all my paperbacks and hardcovers, signed copies on there. I usually include some extras with it. I usually even sell some ebooks on there as well because I've gone wide with most of my stuff. And I also have a store that's got some t-shirts, so like some support indie horror shirts. That idea comes from I was a skateboarder growing up, and skateboarding was always like on the fringe, and it was the whole idea of the whole indie thing, support your local skateboarder, all of that. And that's kind of how I feel about indie publishing. You know, it's like it's bootstraps, and I'm all in on that. So that's why I came up with that support indie horror kind of concept and design. And so I've got that and some other things on there. But jbauerauthor.com is the easiest way to find me.
Wait.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you more.
Yeah.
For the viewers, if you're in the Dallas area, come down to Texas Author Con, July 14th and 15th in Richardson, Texas. It's a free event, but if you want to be eligible for the door prizes, you need to sign up for a ticket at Eventbrite, which we'll have a link down in the description. And we'll be seeing you in a little over a month.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Can't wait.
I know.